We have learned that the Model B Steinway piano has over 20,000 parts. Each part designed and positioned with scientific and artistic precision. If you wish to make the human mechanism into an instrument of musical expression, then you have to learn to move each and every part of that mechanism with a precision all of its own. The movements being as comfortable as they are biologically sound. Before we discuss the human mechanism, let us clear away one misconception, and that is that anyone can play the piano in a completely relaxed condition. As a matter of fact, there is no such a thing as being completely relaxed. Even when we are asleep, the act of breathing requires contractions of muscles in the respiratory system and in other parts of the body. Sitting at the piano requires contractions of muscles on the entire length of the spine. And what we think is a simple act of lifting the arm to place the fingers on the keys requires contractions of muscles in the back and shoulder and upper arm. Instead of wondering how relaxed you need to be when you play the piano, you would be far more efficient if you would ask yourself, how much tension do I need for this particular act? And that goes for activities away from the piano as well. Anxiety, however, can produce unwanted tension. It usually centers in the neck and in the shoulder area. Of course, all of us get anxious from time to time, and more especially performers, and I certainly am no exception. Many years ago, I remember expressing anxiety and also musical passion in the following manner. And the more passionate the music grew, the more my shoulders pulled up to my ears, until one day a friend telephoned me, and this is what she said. Do you know I can no longer see your neckline when you perform in public? Well, that did it. Shortly after that phone call, I joined a physical movement course in which I learned to give up this tension in my neck and shoulder areas. I did exercises which I strongly advise you to do. I moved my head clockwise very slowly and then counterclockwise. And I stood up with my legs slightly parted and moved my arms in this direction and then in this direction, and of course the other arm as well. And it was quite astonishing. In a few months, I did feel a letting go of tension in my shoulders. I noticed that my shoulders began literally to drop. So you can rest assured, forcing your shoulders down can rid you of unwanted tension and can actually diminish anxiety. And so can correct breathing. Most of us breathe so poorly that it is a wonder how we stay alive. Now, to learn to breathe correctly, have the image of a balloon. We know that when we puff up a balloon, it expands, and when we release the air, it deflates. Now, we're going to do that with our diaphragm. We're going to inhale through our nostrils and expand the diaphragm. And now we're going to exhale through slightly parted lips, hissing as we do so, and we're going to deflate the diaphragm. Inhale. The diaphragm expands, and exhale. The diaphragm deflates. In my book, I have exercises for correct breathing, and some of them are done with a metronome. I strongly advise that you do them every day. They're extremely helpful, not only to good piano playing, but to health itself. In time, correct breathing will become as natural to you as making music on your instrument. The correct technique of breathing will be fed into your automatic pilot, even as fingering is. Another thing that causes unwanted tension is the incorrect height at which we sit. Namely, if we sit too low and drag our arms, or sit too high and press into the keys. Interestingly, no one has ever concluded the exact height at which pianists ought to sit, although some very fine pianists and teachers have come to a conclusion as to what we may consider to be a norm for the height of sitting, and it is this. Depress 5 fingers to the key bed and adjust your bench so that the lower part of your forearm is lined up with the key bed. Now, considering that to be a norm, practice in that position, and if you wish, you can then raise or lower the bench accordingly. But you should know one thing. Most of our great pianists like to sit on the low side. The reason being that they like to transfer the weight of their arm from one key bed to another. In the final analysis, your comfort and your ability to produce beautiful sound will be the determining factor in how high or low you sit at the keyboard. How often have we seen pianists walk across the stage, sit at the piano, and fuss with the adjustable artist's bench? No doubt they're thinking, which way shall I turn the knobs? And finally, when they do turn the knobs, am I going up or am I going down? I'm not ashamed to tell you that I used to be one of those fussers too, until quite recently I discovered a logical way to position the artist's bench. We know that it's much easier to raise ourselves by rolling something down toward the floor, namely clockwise. So before you sit at the bench, of course before the audience comes into the hall, see to it that when you turn the knob, the bench goes up. If you turn the knob clockwise. Now let's see if this bench is positioned properly. I'm going to turn the knob down clockwise. You see, it's incorrectly positioned because it's going down instead of up. So we have to turn the bench, and now it's correctly positioned. And since it's easier to lower ourselves by pulling up, then we won't hurt the muscles in our wrist. If you wish to function at the keyboard at an optimum level, you can begin by aligning your spine, and you do this by gently picking up on your sternum. Breathe correctly as I have instructed you, and drop your shoulders. Relax your jaw. It would be a good idea to slightly part your lips. A clenched jaw sets up tensions in your neck and shoulder area that travel down your arm and adversely affect your finger articulation. Be sure that your heels are firmly rooted to the floor, grounded, so to speak. Line up your feet with the pedals so that the heel is neither to the right nor to the left. Place the balls of both feet over the right pedal and the soft pedal. In this way will you have the best traction when you depress the pedals. If you have a short foot, however, you will have to settle for having your toes on the surface of the pedals. As to your hand position, the famous Viennese pedagogue Theodore Leczetitsky had something very funny to tell a pupil one day about the correct hand position. He demonstrated it as being this, right in the cracks of the piano. Of course, he was telling his pupil in his own inimitable fashion that there really is no correct hand position. Madame Boissier, who was the mother of one of Liszt's pupils, also tells us that Liszt had no hand position but all possible touches. We deduce from this that Liszt must have adjusted his wrist higher or lower and fingers flatter or more curved according to what he was playing. Chopin seems to agree with this. He used to teach his pupils that the correct hand position was E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and B. Notice that in this position, the fingers on the black keys are slightly extended. In other words, the pads of the fingers are grasping the keys. It is wonderful for you to experiment with this extended position on the black keys and the more curved position on the white keys, and touch the positions back and forth. Flatten the fingers, curve the fingers. Position your chair so that your elbows are slightly in front of your torso, not locked in this position. This gives you leverage to play in the treble and also deep down in the bass, where you are now in a position to voice properly. Following all of this advice, your body will be properly aligned to receive and also to express musical impulses. Although all impulses in piano playing originate in the torso and the upper arms, your fingers nevertheless assume the major share of responsibility in everything you play at the piano. For example, when you do this, or this, it appears that all the impulses come from the arms only, yet the fingers grasp each note of the chords and the octaves, the palms hold them in a mold, and then the arms and the torso can radiate energy into the fingers and activate the keys. In order to gain control over your fingers, you need to know two things. One is, always keep your fingers gently taut, T-A-U-T, or slightly stretched throughout your playing. The other is, never overly contract the muscle in your forearm.